Hi all, welcome to rounding 3.4b. So when you are rounding, there's some words to look for that will give you kind of like a clue to know that it is a rounding word problem. And they are estimate, approximately, closest or closer, nearest or near, about, and round. These words, when they're inside a word problem, will let you know that you have to round first and then solve the problem. So always remember to label your boundary numbers and your midpoint. These are two very important words to know when rounding. You always have boundary numbers and you always have midpoint. And we're going to be looking at some examples in a second. Here's one though. So it says round 176 to the nearest 10. So the boundary numbers for 176 would be 170 and 180. And that would be the two boundary numbers. And then you have to figure out what the midpoint would be. That means midpoint is a number that's exactly in the middle, in the center between those two boundary numbers. And that always has a 5 in it. And the boundary numbers always has zeros in it. So 176 would be just past 175 right here. So it would round to 180. And what you can imagine is just think about if you were driving a car down this road, pretend this is a road, you're driving it down the road and then you run out of gas. So you have to decide, okay, will I walk to this gas station or will I walk to this gas station? It would make more sense to walk here, right? 176 rounds to 180. And there's 3 reasons why. It's closer, it's past the midpoint. If the number is on the midpoint or greater, then you go to the biggest boundary number. That's very important. Let me say that again. If the number is on the midpoint or greater, then you round to the greatest midpoint, to the greater midpoint. And if also the one's place is 5 or greater, you round up. Okay, so let's look at some examples. So here, it says rounding to the nearest 10. So usually you'll have 2 digits, and sometimes you'll have 3 digits when you need to round to nearest 10. So we'll practice both of those. So think about 32. In between what 2 tens is that? And sometimes we get stuck. So if you get stuck, you can actually just write your tens. Let's count by tens and write those. Let me change the colors, you can see better. It's 10, count with me, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90. We'll stop there. So think about in between what 2 tens would 32 be? Okay, that would be between 30. So that would be your one of your boundary numbers. And your other one is 40. So that's your other boundary number. So 32 would be between here, between 30 and 40. It's somewhere in between there. And our job is to find out where and where it rounds to. Something else you can use if you, and you know, it's okay to stop and write down your tens right here. That's a strategy you can use. You can also use a hundreds chart to look at it. It's right here. Here's 30 and 40. 32 is right here. It's in between 30 and 40. Here's 30. And then you come, and then you would go all the way here to get to 40. It's in between those 2 numbers. Okay, so now you have to decide what number is right in between 30 and 40. That would be 35. Now we have to find 32. Well, 32 would fall, just this will be about 31, 32, about right here. About 32, and then 33, 34. You can even write your little tick marks if you'd like. Now, where will 32 round to? I'm going to put a big dot here where 32 is, and you have to decide where's it going to round to 30 or to 40. Think of that story we said. If you're out of gas, you're going to go to this gas station or this gas station. You're going to go here, right? And for 3 reasons. It's closer. It has not passed the midpoint. Here's our midpoint. It has not passed the midpoint. And the ones place is 4 or less. If the ones place is 4 or less, you go back to the least boundary number. If it's on the midpoint, if it's 5 or more, you go up. Okay, let's try the next one. 55. That would be in between 50 and 60. 50 and 60. And our midpoint would be 55. Now this one is right on the midpoint. 55 is right on the midpoint. And the rule for rounding is if it's on the midpoint, you round up. So it would round to 60. So 55 rounds to 60 because it's on the midpoint. It's 5 or greater. So it has to round up. Okay, the last one has 3 digits. And you have to think about this a little differently. You have to look at this 23. 223 is in between 220 and 230. And the midpoint would be 225. Okay, so now 223 would be about, so let's see, that's 221, 222, 223, about right here. Has it passed the midpoint? Nope, it has not, has it? Let's put our number here. 223. It has not passed the midpoint. The ones place, which is a 3, is 4 or less. You still look at the ones place, even if it's 3 digits running to nearest 10. It's 4 or less, so you go back to the least boundary numbers, to the least boundary number. So it's closer. It hasn't passed the midpoint, and the ones place is 4 or less. All right, let's look at rounding to the nearest 100. Okay, and we can write out, just like we wrote our tens on the side, now we can write our hundreds on the side. So you count with me: 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, 600, 700, 800, 900, and we can then put 1,000 there. So here we are counting by 100s. We're skip counting by hundreds. Last time we skip counted by tens. This is skip counting by hundreds. Okay, our number is 248. And now we have to look at the hundreds place. Before it was rounding to the nearest 10, but when you're rounding to the nearest 100, you're looking at the hundreds place. So 248 falls between 200 and 300. That number is going to be somewhere in between these two numbers right here. Okay, so that means our boundary numbers will be 200 and 300. And our midpoint, 250. Now we have to decide where is it going to fall on this number line, before the midpoint or after. That's right, right here, 248 will be about right there. Very close to right before it, 248. Has it passed the midpoint? Nope, it sure hasn't. Okay, so we have to go right here. It's going to round to 200. It's almost to the midpoint, but it's not yet. And so the reason why I round to the smaller boundary number is because it's closer. It hasn't passed the midpoint, and it's 49 or less. Before, we had to look at the ones place. Now you're looking at both the ones place and the tens place. If it's 49 or less, you go back. If it's 50 in the ones place and the tens place or more, you round up. Okay, let's look at 503. That would be in between 500 and 600, right there. Right? So our boundary numbers will be 500 and 600. And our midpoint, 550. Now this one's very close to this boundary number, right? 501, 502, 503. But right here, very close to it. So of course, this was pretty easy. We can tell that it's going to round there because it's closer. It has not passed the midpoint, and it's 49 or less. Put our number here, 503. Okay, our last one is 427, And this one's going to be in between, right here, between 400 and 500. Again, don't be scared to write your numbers on the side. That's perfectly fine. As we're learning rounding, use all the strategies that you have and that help you. Okay, so our boundary numbers will be 400 and 500. And our midpoint, 450. Good. Okay, and now we have to find where 427 will be. Has 427 passed the midpoint? Nope, it has not, right? It's going to be about right here. We'll say about right here. 427. We'll put our big dot there. Has it passed the midpoint? Nope, so we go back. Has not passed the midpoint. The ones in the tens place right here is 49 or less, right? And it's closer. All right, that before we end, there's also, I want to show you this chart that you can glue in your journals. This chart can be helpful as well when you are rounding. And if you notice, it has the boundary numbers here, 0 to 100, 100 to 200, and so on until you get to 1,000. So this will help you a lot when you're rounding to the nearest 100. If you notice, 100 to 149 always rounds down. And then it has, for example, this 150 to 100 to 200 rounds up. So this is just a little chart to help you while you're learning how to round, so you can know what numbers go back and what numbers go forward when you are rounding. And remember our rounding words. When you're looking at word problems, these are the words to look for, and that will let you know that you round. And always remember, round first. If, for example, if you have to multiply and it says approximately, you have to round those numbers before you multiply. That's very important. Always round first. All right, guys, that's all for today. We will see you next time.